With the help of Hashem, we are learning Shabbos Daf Lamed Hey. We left off on Daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amud. We just learned, Chevra, regarding Bein Hashmashas, that there is a machloikes between Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef. Right? Bishitas Rebbe Yehuda, Rabbah gives the longer estimation of the time period, and Rabbi Yosef gives a shorter estimation of the time period of Bein Hashmashas. And the Gemara is going to give a contrast that regarding a different topic, Rabbi Yosef, their pattern of who is the one that gives the longer, who was the one that gives the shorter, is going to be reversed, as the Gemara will explain. We're going to learn more regarding Shitas Rebbe Nechemia concerning the length of Bein Hashmashas. We're going to have some Agadata today regarding Hara Carmel. There's going to be a very interesting known, and it should be known, what appears to be a stira between our Gemara Shabbos Lamed Hey and other Midrashim concerning where is nowadays the Be'eda Shemiliam. Just to make it clear, notice there was this large boulder stone that actually looked a little bit like a sieve. That means it was a large stone that was very porous. That was the stone that after Miriam Hanaviyah passed away, and in her tzchus there was the water, so Moshe Rabbeinu needed again. That was the story of what happened, that Hashem told him to speak to the stone the second time. And he hit the stone, and that was a stone that traveled with us, and from it came out tremendous amounts of water. Now, you should know that halachically, those waters had a din of a mayon, of mayim chayim. That means we had a movable mayim chayim, which is really counterintuitive, because the definition normally of living water is water that comes out of a spring, which is coming out of the earth. It's affixed in its place, and not only did it move with us, but when we came into Eretz Yisrael, it was placed somewhere. Our Gemara, with the Girsa that we have, tells us that the Be'er Miriam is in the Mediterranean Sea. And there's a medrash that says that the Be'er Miriam is in the Yam Kineres, and we'll just speak it out as we learn through our sugya. Going back, there's going to be different simanim that the Gemara is going to give as to determine when the beginning of night is. Now, many people are familiar, that's also Shabbos Daf Lamed Hey. Night begins when the 3 medium-sized stars become visible. Most people, already in the times of the Gemara, were not familiar to determine what does Shloisha Kechavim Beinanim mean. That's the whole challenge. It's not when you can see 3 stars. Bigger stars you can see even when it's still halachically Bein Hashmashas, before night. Smaller stars you won't even be able to see in the beginning of night. So there's going to be very interesting benchmarks, simanim in nature, how to determine when the beginning of night is. I know nowadays we're living in a new world. You look at your Zmanim apps and you can see it, but these are going to be, it should be more known. Aside of the Shloisha Kechavim that we know we can't make use of, we're going to have Moedidika Zmanim and the various old, ancient Jewish minhagim connected to different sounds of a Schaefer that were made. Ultimately, there were 6 blasts. 6 blasts means 2 sets of tarat, not made together. And that was different blasts that were made to notify that town, that village, that Shabbos is approaching, or that Shabbos already approached. It was going to tkiya, and then a truah, and then a tkiya, truah, tkiya. Moedidika, it's going to be a very interesting daf. Again, let's start on daf Lamed Hey Amud Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amud. So Rabbah is the one, as we just learned before, he's the one that gives the longer time period of Bein Hashmashas, unlike Rabbi Yosef that gives a shorter time frame, as we learned above. So the Gemara says, V'chilufa, these 2 Amoraim, Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef, they have a reversed opinion. Reversed meaning Rabbah will give the shorter, the smaller, Rabbi Yosef the larger. Complete different topic concerning Chalta, concerning the basket. What are we talking about basket? Says the Gemara, the Amar Rabbah, Chalta bastrei koira, if you have a basket that's large enough to hold the amount of 2 koir. Every koir, remember, is 30 saw. That means a basket, a keli, that is large enough to hold 60 saw. Still, shari litaltula, you are allowed to move it. What's pshat? There comes a time that a very large keli, halachically, is not considered a keli. And the Gemara is making a beautiful bridge link between Hilchas Tumah and Tara and Hilchas Shabbos. Hilchas Tumah and Tara, it's a kula. In other words, if something is not considered halachically a keli, a utensil, it's not even susceptible to becoming tummy, even if a source of tumah has halachic contact. By Shabbos, it's punkt fakert. Something that's not deemed a keli becomes muksa. Now, as we'll go through Shabbos, there's so many different types of muksa, but it's a common theme. For something not to be muksa, it needs to be mukhan. Mukha means it was designated for, it was prepared for. If it's not a keli, it's not. It's not a mitzias, so it wasn't prepared for anything, it doesn't exist. So it's interesting, a keli after a certain size, beneged tumantara, is not a keli, and therefore it's not shaykh to becoming tamei. Beneged hilchas Shabbos, if something is not a keli, it becomes muksa. So what's that size keli? Now there are details, we're speaking specifically now about a wooden utensil. Let's go with that. Chazal tell us in a pasuk in Shmini, the Torah gives various material items, kleyates, and in the same pasuk it says oisak, or a sack. And Chazal learn from the fact that in the same pasuk we mentioned these two items, not metal but as kleyates, that just like a sack is something that's made to transport other things, you put things in a bag, and therefore you can move it, whether it's empty, and even when it's full. No one makes a bag that big that you can't move it when it's full. A kleyates, either if it's made lenachas, if it's made to be stationary, or it's pashut so big that when it's full, if you move it, you might break it. So you de facto leave it stationary, not when it's empty, even if it's only when it's full, is not considered a keli. Now, how large is that? So Rabbah is the one that holds that even if it's the size of two, that it can hold two koid, it's still considered a keli. And therefore, Shlema Hals, you can move it. When does it change that status? When it hits the size of 3 koid. Ubas tlasa koide. Now it's a zoy grois. It's no longer considered a keli. So by tumantara, it's a kula. It cannot become susceptible. It won't become tummy. But in Hilchas Shabbos, now it's muksa. Muksa, guys, doesn't mean you can't touch it. Muksa means you can't move it. Bachlal, such a large kelim, it's not that often that people moved it. But if you would want to move it, you may not, because it's muksa. Asal taltula. And Rabbi Yosef gives the larger share. In other words, he says that even bas toloisa koira, you can still move it. When do you say, it's so large, it's not considered a utensil, it's almost considered like a fixed. It's ois keli, bas arba koiri, only if it's the size that it can have in it 4 koir, then it's asur. Okay, so Rab is the mekel.
If there is wheels, does it make any sense?
So he's asking if there's wheels. So that is what we learn concerning, we have this in Mesachtos Alois, concerning Sheda Tevo Migdal. But Sheda Tevo Migdal, they used to carry people on. Let's get back to this if the audience knows the answer. If it has wheels, it's not a soil lenachas, and and you can move it. It's not bottle. The examples that we give concerning whether it can become tummy, whether someone in it is going to be separated, because any keli that in itself is not shaykh to become tummy, it stops the tumah from going up. That was the idea that they used to carry people be'eretz ha'amim in these sedans. They used to put, 4 people would carry a chacham on top, large carriage. Then they were matama avira the eretz ha'amim. That was before that. The solution of gush was making an oil. How would they make an oil? That's the whole sugi of oil zaruk. Whether oil zaruk is considered an oil or not. If it's not considered an oil, it cannot be mafsik from tuma. But if it's considered an oil, it's only going to be mafsik if it cannot be mekabel tuma itself. So these large boxes that were not on wheels, since they were very big, they were not makabel tumah. Maybe wheels are different. Okay, weiter. Now, says the Gemara, Amar Abaye, boy minei demar. I once asked my margen, the master was the stepfather and the teacher of Abaye was Rabba Bar Machmeni. I once asked the poyel, halacha l'maisa, b'shas maisa, in other words, there was an actual need. And he told me, even though that normally he held that Bastrei Koide was Sharei, Sharei in the yeshiva, many people are lenient when they're learning theory. When you ask them halacha l'maisa, no, he was more machmir. And vafilu Bastrei Koide still loy Shareli. Now the question is, whose shita did he follow? So the Gemara says, "Come on, kahaitana detran." It's this topic of size concerning muksa is not discussed in the Tanoim, but the size concerning hilchas tum and tara is in discussion. We learn a Mishnah in Kalim, kaveres hakash. Kaveres hakash means a straw basket. Kaveres also means a beehive, which means chavra a round. Remember, it's not a beehive. A round basket. What we know, a large round basket, or v'kaveres hakonim, a reed. Straw basket, or a large round straw basket, a large reed basket, or uboir sfina Alexandrias. So many ships, the ships that were not rowboats, ships that were made to go through the sea, you have to have drinking water. So they would have reservoirs, it would be a wooden keli, a big wooden receptacle in which they put the drinking water. Point of all these three is that these are wooden utensils that are very large, that we're speaking about. Says the Mishnah, Afal pi sheyesh lem shalayim, even if they have a bottom, which means that they can properly rest. But if, vehein means if they are large enough to be machzik, the amount of 40 saw. What's 40 saw? We just said 2 koir. But there's another milsa al gav urcha kamashmalan, that when it comes to the storage of liquids, even though every keli, you could put a little bit more beyond what the keli can hold. A little bit, like it's going to sit on the rim, but you're very limited. When it comes to salads, you can make a heap. How much can you heap on top of a keli? So including the heap, it's a third. That's from this Mishnah. That's a fact. That mem sabalach, a keli that's large enough to hold either, if you're holding liquids, 40 saw, which would mean shehem 40 saw is 2 koid. Again, every koid is 30 saw. That size already renders it tar. Here you see. Why does it render it tar? Because we said, because it's too heavy, right, Shlomo, to move it, at least when it's full. Again, we're making this correlation. So if something is not considered a keli, lakula, for dinei Torah, it's not mekabel tuma, that becomes the chumrah that for hilchas Shabbos, azoi, it's not a keli. Okay, if it's not a keli, it automatically becomes muktzah. So here we're even more machmir, much more machmir than Rabbi Yosef. And Amar Abaye, this is what we just mentioned regarding shiyurim. Shma mina, from here we see that high gutsha. 1 second. No, it's 40 saw is a koid and 10 saw. I just want to go back to that. 40 saw, 2 koid. How much is 2 koid? Just 60 saw. No, it's any keli that can hold 40 koid belach. 40 saw, thank you, which is 60 saw biyavesh, not because the walls are bigger, because that's the point. You can make a heap. So Abaye says from here you see that high gutsha til sahava, that how much more how much more do you get when you make a heap, obviously, of solids, including the heap, because from 40 to 60 you have a third, right, milabar. Okay, says the Gemara. Coming back to what we learned in the previous sugya, right? What did the Braisa say? That when there's a certain redness on the horizon, that's a siman, azvaz, that it's Ben Hashmashas is beginning. So says the Gemara, Abaya, Chazyel Rav Abaya, according to one version, noticed how Rava the Kadave Lamaitav, he was looking at the west, he was looking at the horizon, Lochayda, to see whether this redness is there, to know if Ben Hashmashas began. So Amalei, so Abaya asks Rava, 1 second, did we not learn Vahatanya Kolz Mancha Pnei Mizrach Madim? And that was the Brais and Daf Lamed Aleph. Pnei Mizrach means you're looking at the western horizon, you're looking at the wrong direction. You got to look at the color of the eastern horizon. Amalei, to which Rava responds, you didn't understand Pshat in the Braisa. Mi Savrat Pnei Mizrach Mamish. I know the words are Kol Zman She Pnei Mizrach Madimin. What it means is Loi Panim Loi. It means look at the direction that gives redness in the Mizrach. What side of the heavens gives the redness in the side of Mizrach? Maidev. So the siman, mamash, you learn a braisa, and you see bepoil mamash, you got to look on the opposite side. There's another version that Ikeda Amri, Rava saw Abaya was looking at Mizrach to look for this redness on the sky to know whether Ben Hashmashas is beginning. And Rava tells Abaya, me savrat pnei Mizrach mamish, same concept. Don't look at the Mizrach. No, you got to look. It's the redness that's in the Maidev. Panim hamadimim es Mizrach. You're looking at the siman in the western side because it then shines towards the east, and the siman is when it comes to a window. In other words, the sunlight passes through a window, but when the sunlight passes through a window, where will you see the light? On the opposite side of the window. So that's the way we look at the heavens, that the Pnei Mizrach and the Pnei Maidev is the window, because sun is setting in the Maidev. The sunlight is going through the Maidev, and from there it's hitting Pnei Mizrach. Now, Rav Nechemia Omer, concerning the length of the time of Bein Hashmashis, Kedei sheyahalech adam, the time that it takes for a person to walk from when sun begins to set, how much makoim, a half a mil. Now, today when you speak about Zman and we're different people, you have to give a minute, which is much easier. Chazal did not give normally such precise times, but we're very careful not to give nasato devaracha l'shiyurim. Don't give something that will be interpreted or applied by everyone in a different way. We try to avoid that. And taka yechava, how long does it take to walk a mil? We all know all of these other different shitas like we mentioned, right? You have in the smallest, how long does it take? The 18 minutes, the 24 minutes, and all of the shiurim in between. So the Gemara is giving you another siman to try to to make a uniformity in this, the time that it takes for you to walk a half a mil. So Amar Rabbi Chanina, he's speaking to people that live near the Carmel region. So if you are standing on top of the mountain, which is right near the Mediterranean, and you see the sun, now you begin to see the shkia when you are on top. Then let me see, pick it up by heart. It's still the end of day. And if you were now to walk down the mountain and go into the Mediterranean and go to the mikveh and go back up, when you would come to your original point of departure, you walk now the half a mil, which means that you began right before Bein Hashmashis, and you'll come back right after Bein Hashmashis. Let me tell you why this is so important. Let's speak about Truma, for example. In order to eat Truma, if a person becomes Tamei, it's not enough for them to go to the mikveh, but Kiyadu, the first Mishnah in Barachas, they have to have head of Shemesh. Now, here's the chap. If a person becomes Tamei during Bein Hashmashis, and they go to the mikveh, they can't say that after it says they can eat Truma. Why? Because like we mentioned, Bein Hashmashis, we have a suffix. Bein Hashmashis, if Bein Hashmashis is still day, then it would work. Person became tummy during Bein Hashmashis. They went to the mikveh. Now that it's night, they had mikveh and head of shemesh. If Bein Hashmashis is already night, then if a person becomes tummy during the Bein Hashmashis period, the shkoyach that you went to the mikveh. But head of shemesh would mean tomorrow night. So when you are on top of a mountain, it means you're much taller, and you begin to see the shkia, it's not yet shkia, it's right before shkia. So that's if you become tummy, then he says chaparain. We're not speaking about running, because if you're speaking about running again, then the time that it takes a person, you became tummy when you begin to see sunset. It's really prior to sunset. What will be the chatzi mil going down, going to the mikveh? We read about this, it's very difficult. How long does it take you to go to the mikveh? Some people, they get undressed and dressed in a minute and a half. Some people are kratzers, but that's the best we get. Time takes to go down, you go to the mikveh, you get dressed, you go back to the point where you went down from. Now, you became tummy before Bein Hashmashis, you went through Bein Hashmashis, and now it's Vadei Laila. V'zeu shiur shel Rab Nechemya. Welcome to Gemara. Okay, Amar Rab Chia. Now that we mentioned the uniqueness that the top of Har HaKarmel is the time that it takes, that's the walking down, mikveh and going back up. I want to tell you something else about the top of Har HaKarmel. That Haroitza Lirois Be'era Shemariam, like we mentioned in the intro, there's a physical boulder, which is a large stone, and we know that it's porous. And when we entered Eretz Yisrael, it was taken, according to our Gemara, to the Mediterranean Sea, and it was placed, and it stays near the shore, adjacent to Har HaKarmel, and v'oid, that when you stand on top of Har HaKarmel, you can yal al Reish HaKarmel, v'yitzape, you gotta really gaze, and v'yira, and you're gonna see it. You might see other stones that are immersed in the shallow water of the ocean, so kemin kivra b'yam, it will look to you like a sieve. In other words, it's a large stone. What makes it unique is that it's filled with little holes, filled with lechalach. And v'zoihi be'erish milium. Now, like we mentioned in the introduction, that you have written in various midrashim the same concept, but not concerning Har HaKarmel and in the Mediterranean, but concerning Har HaYeshimoin and the Kineres. To the point that some hold that the gears of our Gemara has to be amended. But again, no one amended it, because the way you amend the girsa is not by saying that a different version makes more sense or it has more sources. The Bach, he found begashmias gemaras that were written with his girsa. It was when you have two options, then you use seichel. Like if you have a work from the Tanoim, which is Midrashim, you're going to follow that which it says in the Medrash. But if you don't have such a actual source, then we only speak it out Balpeh. But again, the accepted is that the Be'era Shemiriam is in the Kineres. Says the Gemara Amarav. Also, to continue a little bit more about the Be'era Shemiriam. From here you see that Amayan HaMitaltel, that if you have a halachic spring, even though it's moving, where do you find that? Like the only scenario of a Mayan HaMetaltel, my friends, is Be'era Shemiriam. But the Chiddush is that even though you might have argued that since it's moving, the waters, it becomes like a keli. What's the din of a keli? So many dinim. When you make a mikvah, forget about a Mayan. Mayim she'uvim, whether it's midorais or whether it's midorabanan, invalidates water for a mikvah. So the point is that if we were to view this stone that has filled with water as a metaltalin, then the water in it, not only is it not a mayan water, it's not geshamim water, it becomes water, I don't care where it came from, that's disconnected from its source, and now it's in a gathered keli. It's the worst invalidation for a mikvah. Punkt fakert, it's not mayim she'uvim because it continuously has a din of a mayan, and what's unique about a mayan is that the halacha, for example, that the waters of a mikvah cannot be running, can be zoichalin. You don't have that by a mayan. By a mayan, we go to the mikvah of Darizal. I don't care if the water is running. It doesn't have to be gathered. There's no concept of mayim she'uvim if it is spring water. Even though the mayan itself is moving, it has a din of mayan. The waters also are not susceptible to becoming tummy, which is another big thing. And therefore they are valid, they continuously remain halachic mayim chayim. And now what was Rav referring to? Where do you have in the world a mayan that's metaltal? Oto dosidos. Miriam. Now guys, it's more than it appears. Like, how do we view the waters of an ocean? Is it make shamim? Or is it a mei mayan? In other words, if the waters of the ocean have the status of make shamim, then let's go to the Kineres. Like, what is the Kineres? Well, the Be'era Shemiriam, the water that is going out from the Be'era Shemiriam, has a din of a mayan, with a lot of halachic consequences. Let's go weiter. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Let's go weiter. Bein Hashmoshes de Rabbi Yehuda. Right, let's go Lerabba. Right, that was the whole thing. Let's go Lerashitas Rabba. Koyhanim toivlim boy. If Shmuel were to accept Shitas Rabbi Yehuda, we just explained this. Once a kohen becomes tummy during Bein Hashmoshes, there's no point for him to go to the mikveh. He can go to the mikveh. The point is, his mikveh will not allow him to eat truma at that Tzeis HaKechavim, because he already became tummy during Bein Hashmoshes. So the way Shmuel is saying we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda is by saying is that if a kohen becomes tummy during the time that Rabbi Yehuda says is Bein Hashmoshes, which is prior to Rabbi Yossi holds not only is Bein Hashmoshes a shorter shiur. See, like Rabbi Yehuda, just to say we had to get Me'adrab and Rabbi Yosef, whichever one, it's a period of time. Rabbi Yosef holds that Bein Hashmoshes is Keherafayin. When is the Bein Hashmoshes of Rabbi Yossi? After the Bein Hashmoshes of Rabbi Yehuda. So the way Shmuel is basically saying, I paskin like Rabbi Yossi, is that if a kohen becomes tummy during the Bein Hashmoshes of Rabbi Yehuda, since Shmuel says, I don't agree with Rabbi Yehuda, it's not yet Bein Hashmoshes, what is it? Vadayoim. Perfect. Let the kohen go to the mikvah, and then he went to the mikvah during the day, the Bein Hashmoshes will pass, and then he can already eat truma that night. In other words, the Gemara says, Laman. Obviously, Shmuel is saying that I don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, because according to Rabbi Yehuda himself, the period of Bein Hashmoshes is a period halachically known as a suffix. And if a kohen becomes tummy during the Bein Hashmoshes, he cannot eat that night, even though he went to the mikvah, because maybe he became tummy already at night. You got to wait until the next night. Ella, Shmuel means to say that if your kohen becomes tummy during the Bein Hashmoshes of Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yossi, koyhanam toivil boy. So the Gemara says, well, pshita. or to word it differently, why doesn't Shmuel just say, I paskin like Rabbi Yossi? So the Gemara says, because people might not have properly understood the Shita of Rabbi Yossi. Now everyone is clear. Rabbi Yossi says that Bein Hashmashos is keherefein. It's a moment. And everyone knows that the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi is at the end of the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, but there could be two ways of understanding the end. The end can mean, Chevra, let's go that Rabbi Yehuda's Bein Hashmashos, let's go, is 13 and a half minutes. Rabbi Yossi's Bein Hashmashos is 2 seconds. Are these 2 seconds at the end of the 13 and a half minutes? Or are these 2 seconds after the 13 and a half minutes? Shmuel wanted to make it clear, not only that he paskins like Rabbi Yossi, but the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi begins after the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda ends. There is no overlap. If Rabbi Yossi would have overlapped, even only for 2 seconds, at the end of the shir of Rabbi Yehuda, Shmuel could not make the statement. Because Shmuel made a blanket statement. He says that if you become tamei during any of the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, which would also include the last moment, still day, chaparain, go to the mikveh. If you go to the mikveh, then you went to the mikveh noch before Bein Hashmashos began, then you'll go through Bein Hashmashos, then you'll eat a truma when it's dark. In other words, Mao the Tema, one might have thought that the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi, which is taka very short, but it's an overlap. It's Meishach Shayach Bid Rabbi Yehuda. It happens, it's Shayach to that time. It happens during tak at the end, and it's very quick, but it's during that time. And if that would have been the case, Shmuel cannot say that if you become tamei during the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, it's still considered day. No, it depends when. If you become tamei at the end, Rabbi Yehuda calls it Bein Hashmashos, so does Rabbi Yossi. No one will allow a kohen who becomes tamei during Bein Hashmashos to be able to go to the mikveh and to eat that evening. Kumash Malon, the shlim Bein Hashmashos Rabbi Yehuda. However you measure the shir of Rabbi Yehuda, whether it's like Rabba, whether it's like Rabbi Yosef, whenever it ends, then v'hadar maschil, the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi. So whenever you become tamei during any part of the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, Lishitas Rabbi Yossi, and Shmuel obviously is paskening like Rabbi Yossi, you can theoretically, if you can go to the mikveh in a moment, you became tamei, boom, go to the mikveh. All that is day, and then you have Bein Hashmashos, and then you have the proper Herev Shemesh. Amar Rabba Bar Bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yechanan. Rabbi Yechanan, obviously, as we'll see, has a suffix who is correct. Whether we paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, whether we paskin like Rabbi Yossi. Shmuel is paskening like Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yechanan has a suffix. What do you do when you have a suffix? You have to be machmer. And ki yedua, the famous machlokes, people quote the Rambam and the Rashba, but it's many. Whether we say, like the Rambam, that the concept of being machmer, suffix deoraisa, which we are lochumra, is only midrabanan, or whether suffix midoraisa is midoraisa lochumra. But whichever way, there are many nafkaminas, but we are machmer. So says Rabbi Yechanan concerning El Shabbos. In other words, I want to know: Can I do malacha Bein Hashmashos? No. Okay, from when may I not do malacha? We just said, according to Rabbi Yossi's Bein Hashmashos noch begins at the after. So Rabbi Yechanan says, whoa, when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos, we're going to begin Bein Hashmashos earlier. However, concerning Truma, now what's the Truma? The Gemara is going to clarify, as we'll see. The Chumrah will be to follow Rabbi Yossi, I paskin like Rabbi Yossi. Follow Rabbi Yossi, linyan Truma. So the Gemara wants to clarify the latter statement. Bish loyma halacha Rabbi Yehuda linyan Shabbos. We understand. In other words, Rabbi Yechanan hatasafik. We paskin like whom? Benegeya. When does Bein Hashmashos begin? Because of his doubt, he's machmer. Follow Rabbi Yehuda. Aval linyan Truma. What does he mean? Maihi. If you're trying to say that you're machmer like Rabbi Yossi, what does machmer mean? In what we were speaking about, you're machmer that if you become tamei again, when can you go to the mikveh and eat that night? If you became tamei, vadayoim. So again, according to Rabbi Yossi is the makel. According to Rabbi Yossi, you can become tamei even later, even during the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, and still eat truma that night. So, and again, the point we're trying to make is that unlike Shmuel, Rabbi Yechanan had a suffix, so he's machmer. So if it means what we're talking about, paskening like Rabbi Yossi is not the chumrah, it's the kula. Ilema letfila, sveika means, how can you be lenient? Because maybe Bein Hashmashos is from the time of Rabbi Yehuda. Daf lamed hey, amid beis. Ella, no. It means, from when can you start eating truma? That's the point. In other words, when it comes to determining when did you become Tamei, of course you have to be Machmer like Rabbi Yehuda. The moment Bein Hashmashas of Rabbi Yehuda begins, even according to Rabbi Yechanan, you no longer can go to the mikveh and eat that night. No one is saying you can't go to the mikveh. We're trying to point out you can't go to the mikveh and say, now I went to the mikveh, and now I went through Bein Hashmashas, now it's safe and I can eat. Okay, you became Tamei during the day. The kohen is chalishing for food. From when could he eat? That's the word.
In other words, when is Erev Shemesh?
When was the head of Shemesh? When is the end? And Rabbi Yossi lengthened, especially as we just explained, there is no overlap. So that is the keherafayin, okay? Add the herafayin, li'in achilas truma. In other words, the li'achli kohanim truma ad dishlim, not only the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yehuda, but the Bein Hashmashos of Rabbi Yossi, which is a chumrim. Okay, so now we began to speak about the end. So let's focus more on the end. And this is many people are familiar with this quotation. And again, already in the times of the Gemara, that they had all these unusual ways of making shiurim, that's what they used then, they had a hard time paskening halacha l'maisa based on this concept. But the concept is like this. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel, koicha v'echad yoim. You have to understand, Shmuel was the big bucky. He says that I know the paths of the heavenly bodies the way I know the pathways of Nardo, which was a little village that everyone knew exactly every nook and cranny over there. So he was familiar, he was the master. So he says that if there's only the appearance of one koichav, then it's for sure yoim. It means if you can only see one star. If you can already see two, that's another way of determining. It means that we are now in the period of Bein Hashmashos. When he had on Amud Aleph, whether it was Abaya gazing at the east or Rava gazing at the east, they already were not gazing in the heavens for this. Already then, they couldn't determine this. Shloisha, if it's three kechavim laila. And that's not from Amoira, that's really already in the times of the Tanoim. Tanya nami yachi, koicha v'echad yoim. Amazing. Shnayim ben Hashmashos. Shloisha laila. And that says, Amar Rabbi Yossi, what's the bach? Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Ovin. Now, hold on. Don't apply this that quick. I'll tell you why. Because we're not speaking about Keichavim Gedolim. Whatever we consider large stars, large stars can be seen by day. In Andrevetu, you can see Shloisha Keichavim. It's not even Bein Hashmashos. It's Yoim. V'loi Keichavim Ketanim She'einirim Ela Balayla. And therefore, these koichavim ketanim, when you say if you see koichav echad, it's yoim, you know what? If you know that what you're looking at is called a koichav katan, even seeing one already means it's night, because these ketanim can only be seen after tzeis.
So if you know,
Ella, just finish the line. Ella beinanim. In other words, whatever halacha determines, whatever the Torah determines to be medium-sized stars, that is the stars. That is the stars that are needed to determine now it's Seis HaKechavim. And again, that's why the Samanim we had in the last daf, right, about the upper sky should be as dark as the horizon of the sky. All those were Samanim that the Amoraim gave because they were unable to apply this halacha l'mais. And again, how lucky are we? Today we have watches and it's amazing. We're very meduyik. We are able to be machavin, not l'shiyurim. Now there's a machlokes in Zmanim, all the different shitas, that's something else that doesn't bother us, because in Chazal there were different opinions, but we know how to apply it now with a tremendous precision, which did not exist in the times of Chazal. Yeah, about what you're saying, cannot go out Motzei Shabbos, of course not. Avad and now you have to compound it that the types of pollution that we have today did not exist then, and it Pashut blocks, compounded with the type of electric illumination that we have today did not exist. In other words, the reason why here, when you look up to the heavens and you go to any countryside, it's a whole different heavens. Like we're missing a big experience of life. People should understand that. We're blind. Like we're all blind. People that love camping. That's the most amazing experience. Like so wow, like
could be the big stars because they go through.
You don't know. You look. In other words, when there's no light, when light is the way God wants it, at night you have a few people with candles, but there isn't gross torches burning all over the place, and there's less pollution. And you have to know what a koichav beinani. You put them all together, then you see shloisha kechavim beinanim. That it's a raya. It's a raya that it's night. Let's go another few lines. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Zevida. Okay. Let me just bring it back to Hilchas Shabbos. Let's go back to what's the whole Bein Hashmashas by Hilchas Shabbos. Very simple. The rule is like this: that if a person does a malacha b'Shabbos b'shoigeg, he's chayav chatas. If a person has a doubt whether they violated a sin for which, if they would have done it b'shoigeg b'vadei, they would bring a chatas. In many cases, not in all cases, they bring an asham toli. There has to be it's chazik yisura, like today you have to have 2 pieces of meat, one is chaylev, one is shuman vada, you don't know with all the details. But in the case, normally, if a person now were to do a malacha, b'shoigeg, ben hashmashas, what would happen? So you don't bring a chatas. Why? That was the whole sugya, because we don't know halachically whether ben hashmashas is day, whether it's night, or whether it's a zman b'fnei atzmai. We don't know that. So but you will not bring a chatas. So the Gemara says that Rabbi Yosef ben Azvida has a gewaldik chap. What happens, Chevra, if a Yid, God forbid, it's exciting, the chap, it shouldn't happen. The same Yid, the same Shabbos, did a malacha ben hashmashas Friday night to Shabbos, b'shoigig, and did another malacha, Motzei Shabbos to Sunday, during ben hashmashas. Vaday chatos. Because he wants to say that ben hashmashas is either day or night. So miman avshach, this person violated b'shoigeg, he was chayiv chatas. That's his point. Ha'oisem malacha b'shnei bein hashmashos chayiv chatas miman avshach. If bein hashmashos is yoim, so then he was chayiv chatas because of the latter one, because of the one that he did going into Motzei Shabbos. If bein hashmashos is laila, so what he did Motzei Shabbos is nothing. He did it on Sunday, but what he did Friday is a problem. Amar Rava l'shamoi. Rava told his attendant, again we're hearing about the 3 kechavim, atun deloikim luchu b'shiura derabanan. You don't know how to determine the beginning, guys, the beginning of bein hashmashas. When does it start? So what do you have to do? Again, Safik, you have to be machmer. Whereas even the bein hashmashas period itself, you can view that as a chamur dika time, because we're being machmer, because maybe it's yoim. So, for example, Amira la'akum, we paskin, Amira la'akum, the Alter Rebbe is so machmer, because he holds Amira la'akum is mitam shlichus, we can tell an akum lachatchila to do a malacha bein hashmashas. We view bein hashmashas as a suffix. But nevertheless, if you don't know when it begins, you got to bring it in earlier. So what should you do? Ad shimsha reish dikli. The moment the sun is already at the top of the palm trees, guys, Shkia did not begin yet. The bottom of the sun didn't touch the top of the horizon yet. It's for sure not, but once it gets closer, we don't know how to determine the beginning of Ben Hashmashas, with all the colors in the skies. We don't know how to do that. Already light the candles. Atlu shiraga. Sin Shabbos left. Why? Because we don't know. No, when you don't know, you have to extend Shabbos. But the problem is, very nice when it's a visible day. When you're living in Los Angeles, it's every day perfect. But what happens if it's cloudy? So, give me another siman aside of all of the ones we learned until now that it's harder to determine. So he gave a moededika siman. So Rabbi says like this, that bimasa chazil tarnagoyla. When you live in a city, as at nature, that roosters, they perch themselves, they stand on roofs during the daytime of the day. When the day ends, they go away. So look, if you still see roosters perched on the rooftops, chazil tarnagoyla. Another siman in nature is that ravens, they gather together, my friends, in the fields only during the daytime of the day. The moment halachically the day ends, they disperse, they go away. So look for the tarnagoylim on the rooftops in the city. Look for the ravens. Bedabra doesn't mean a midbar, it means out there in the fields. The moment they're not gathered, the moment the roosters are not standing as they are perched on top of the rooftops, it's already, you are entering Bein Hashmashas. It's a very difficult siman to use to light Shabbos candles. I'll tell you why. Because the moment they leave, they disperse. So now what? Can you light the candles? You understand? You got to do it while they're still gathered. Now, Inami, another moededika siman. Go figure. Adonai. Adonai, says Rashi. Adonai is some sort of wild vegetable. It's in the gourd family. I want to read inside the Rashi. Rashi is 50 lines from the top. It's a certain herb. He's Esav. Esav hakori malva, or milava in French. And this type of Esav, olin shaloi, its leaves, noitin letzadachama. It always faces the sun. Can you imagine? It turns. So during Shachris, every day the plant's leaves will face the east. When the sun is in the middle of the heavens, zekufin. So it's fantastic. How do you know when Chatzos is? If it's cloudy, the plant knows where the sun is. You can't see it, it sees it, it knows it. And vela erev kefufin ma'oid lamarav. So you can determine from the leaves of the plant how deep is the sun in the west. So it has to be prior to that leaf being mamash facing flat the horizon, which is arai that the sun is already in the horizon or deeper, that's when you should light Shabbos candles. How great is that? If Kevin can find a picture of this type of wild gourd, that would be phenomenal. You're looking. I know that there are certain other plants that when you touch it, remember out there in the country, the leaves close. There's amazing things in nature. But this is a plant that faces always the sun. What a simon. You remember the
sunflowers do that.
You took something so exotic for me and you just ruined it, Samach. I heard sunflower. Okay, makabel.
The whole day.
Mamish.
And it closes at night, it opens in the morning?
That's so whether maybe in bubble, it's called Nuda Adonai. It almost sounds like God Almighty's name. You have to be careful how you pronounce it. Maybe they didn't have the sunflowers. Maybe that's an Amerikanazach. They had the Adonai flowers. But it's an Esav. It's some sort of herb. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan. Weiter. So you see, what's the bottom line? It's hard to know when does night begin. It's shver. So what a kehillah should do is that they should make a public announcement. It's coming near the beginning of Shabbos. Now it's time to bench licht. Now it's mamish Shabbos. So what do they do? So the minig is sheish tekiah is toikin erev Shabbos, and no one is going to argue with that. 6 blasts, just to know, not like when we're going to learn in Rosh Hashanah that every like tarat. 6 blasts means 2 sets of tarat. Tekiah, they would not do tekiah through tekiah. That was the first blast. We'll see what they waited for. Then at a certain point they did teruah. That's the second. Then when they finished that set, that's already the third. Verstehst? Tekiah, teruah, tekiah, teruah, tekiah means here the sheish. Okay. So let's go. Rishayna. Now, where would they blow it? So in every city, just for the voice to sound, to carry the furthest, they probably went to the tallest building in the middle of the city. Also, where are you? If you're on the edge, and the other edge is far. A place that's relatively equally distant or equally near all of the other houses in that village, and someone on the roof would make the blasting. Right, today in many kehillas in Eretz Yisrael, they have it gavaldik. I know in Crown Heights they have it. I'm sure many other fruma kehillas, there's a siren that goes off. Now, interestingly, they don't follow the old tradition. Maybe because the goyim complain, or it's too noisy. They would do 6 blasts. But let's go through the Seder. Rishayna, the first sounding, which was a tkiyah, was lahavtil eso ami malacha shebesodes. The people that are out there in the fields, which not only have to stop working, but they have to walk back to the city, Snamtzait, and they have to come back home. So they were notified, this is way before Shabbos. Now stop working. Now, this doesn't take away many people that are machmer, they don't work after Chatzos. That's beautiful things, but that was like the end. Shniya, the second sounding, which is a truah, was lahaftil ir, was to stop the labor, the work that's happening in the city. Similarly, v'chanuyois, that is where if you had a store, if you had a shop, you would close the shop. Shlishi is the third, lahadlik esneir, was to light Shabbos candles. These are the words of Rab Nosson, the Tana Rab Nosson, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Omer, that the third was to remind everyone to take off their tefillin, because the minig then was to wear tefillin, then got the whole daytime of the day. Now, the Rosh points out from our Gemara, we now, and guys, we're not learning halacha, whoever lights the Shabbos candles is being makabel Shabbos. Doesn't have to be that way. Even though halacha l'maisa nowadays, that's the klal, and not on a week by week. If it's only once in a while, if you verbalize that I'm lighting the candles, but I'm not being Makabel Shabbos, I think Lashitas Alter Rebbe, you can stretch another 12 and a half minutes. Not the whole 18 minutes afterwards, but you have to say it, and you can't do it every week. But the Rosh points out from our Gemara that lighting the candles doesn't bring in Shabbos, the V'haraya. Let's go Lashitas Rab Nassan. That the third one was to notify the Olam to light the candles. And now we're going to specify certain acts of Melacha that from beginning to end take up a very small period of time that still can be done after the third. And let's keep on reading. Now, after the third, V'shoy Kedei Tzlias Da Koten, you can still, there's enough time afterwards. How much time? The time that it takes either to roast a small fish. Again, these are shiurim that are hard to measure. Oy kedei lahadbik pas betano. They would put the doughs. They would smack it on. They would slap it on the inner wall of the oven. And when is that dough considered baked? So we're going to have when the outer crust. We had mishnayisen, the upper crust, the bottom crust, which also is relatively a very short amount of time. No, it's really theoretically you can still beat soila da cotton. You can still put stick the bread in the oven and remove it. And now, after that time passed, the three other blasts, my friend, were done together. V'toikeya, umaria, v'toikeya, and now it's Shabbos. Okay. Amar Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel. Ma nasu lehem lebavliyim. What can I do regarding the bavliyim shetoikin umarian v'shoifsim mitoich marian? He heard that the final sounding that's done in Bavel is the Teruah. Now, Chevra, as we explained, the 6 blasts is Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah. When you hear, Rabbi Gamliel is like bemoaning, those Babylonians. After the Teruah, that's when Shabbos begins. It sounds like in Bavel they missed a blast. That's unacceptable. That can't even be. Because everyone knows that it's 6. If that is what they actually did, was they didn't even come to the 6th. By the 5th, by the second Teruah, that is when Mamish Shabbos begins. So Havalu Chamisha, that for sure they didn't do. Elo, what Rabbi Gamliel, what Rashbag was bemoaning, everyone blew 6 times. But for some reason, in Babel, Shleima, they would blow Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah. And the second set of Tarat was not Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah, was Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah. They didn't put the Teruah in the middle. They put the Teruah as the 6th. So everyone had 6, but still, he was bemoaning the fact that Teruah was at the end. Ella, shetoikin, v'choizrin v'toikin. Was the first set of 3 was Tekiah, then Teruah, then Tekiah. Let's go with Rab Nassan. The third blast, the Tekiah, was Lichbenchen. Then they would wait that little Zman, which is after Lichbenchen, before Shabbos really comes in, and they would do 3, but what would be the 3? Tekiah, Tekiah, Teruah.
It's way better than like where you harm. Like if someone didn't, like if it's a regular
I would say the fact that you hear 3 sounds together, you know where you're at. No, it's the first 3 were not together. That didn't help. Ella shetoikin v'choizrin v'toikin, and then umarian, and then v'shoifsim mitoich marian. And he was bemoaning that. And the Gemara says, well, so why didn't they change it? Because you don't change these things, because it's a minig aviseim biyadem. Al pi Chasidus, it's very easy to understand this. And Bavel in Eretz Yisrael. Bavel is b'machshakem hoshivani. Bavel is more golus. There's a much higher level of godliness always in the Holy Land. It's called the Holy Land. And you think about, what's Teruah? Like, how do you enter Shabbos? How does a Yid enter Shabbos? So you have to leave the weekday. So the more distant the weekday is from Shabbos, the greater the transformation, going Mechoil El HaKodesh. Marian is like the lower part of tshuva, the bitterness of tshuva, the tzubrachenkeit. You have to break yourself. So in Bavel, the last thing you gotta break yourself. You have to break the week to get into Shabbos. In Eretz Yisrael, you are holier. So even the last sounding, which is choil, the choil is already connected to a tekiah. Tekiah is a much loftier sounding. And by the way, maybe he was not bemoaning the fact that they blew the Teruah. He was bemoaning that Yidden outside of the Holy Land are on a lower level. We have to keep it because that we know from our Aviseinu that that's where we're at. But he lamented, like Chaval, that we're not on a loftier level, perhaps. Says the Gemara, Masni leit Rav Yehuda Rabbi Yitzchak Berei. He had another girsa of this braisa, and in his girsa, the second blast was the time that you would be madlik the neir. Now, who would be the author of that? he had such a braisa. So the Gemara says, come on, what are you telling me there's a third opinion over here? It's obviously not like Rab Nosson. Rab Nosson clearly states that the third is to light the candles. It's not like Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi that says the third.
The fourth.
I'm sorry?
It says the fourth.
What do you mean the fourth?
Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi.
Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says, where does he say it's the fourth? Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says that the third.
Second set, no?
Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi inside the Braisa did not mention when they lit the candles. Tako good way. Rashi says that. I have to go see. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, when would they light the candles? We'll get back to that in a moment. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi just says that the third is. Good. Rashi says it. No, Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi says the fourth. Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi in the Braisa says the third is to be cholos at tefillin. The fourth is lighting of the candles. But here, even I said something before, it's done together. But at least the last two were done together. When it's done together, you have two sounds, whether it's teruah tkiya or tkiya teruah, they were done together. Very good. Shkoyach. So now it can be. Ella, therefore, Rabbi Yehuda, the Braisa that he taught to his son Rabbi Yitzchak was shlishis lahad lekesaner. And now that we have the Braisa quoted in the Gemara, we know that that Braisa follows the opinion of Rabbi Nosson. Says the Gemara, Tana devei Rabbi Yishmael, sheish tekiya is toikin erev Shabbos. Again, announcing the arrival time of Shabbos. I like the way here we emphasize another nuance in the beginning of the sound. Then people that are in the fields stop digging. They stop plowing. And what did we say above it? Because they have to come back into the town. So they begin journeying back into the town. But another detail, there are many fields. There are fields that are farther, there are fields that are closer. They all heard the sounding. If everyone will journey into the town at the same time, who will enter first? Who will enter first are the people that to begin with were closer. What's the problem with that? The people in the city, when they see people coming in later, they're not going to know that they came later. They stop by the first sound. Why did it take them another 5 minutes to enter the city? Because they were 5 minutes further. They might not know that. What might they think? Their fields were also near the city. Why are they entering the city a few minutes later? Because they didn't stop when they heard the sound. They chaptarain something else. So to prevent from that from happening, ve'ein hakroivim rishoyim likanes atri yavoy rechoikim and v'yakonsu kulam ke'echad. Like this, people in the city will see everyone enter at the same time, and there's not going to be this chshad that some people said, listen, I know it's not really Shabbos, so let me work. No. When they heard the first sounding, wherever you're at, boom, you stop doing malach. Now the Braisa continues. That was the first sound. But even though there was a blowing of the first sound, Vadayin, Chanuyas, Psuchais, the stores are still opened, and the Terisim, they would have the shutters. Guys, we're going to learn about this in Beitza, right? They had the shutters. The shutters were taken off, the rolling doors, and they would use them as trays to display their wares. Many stores would display their shchoira already on the street. So they can have the stores are open, the trisin, the shutters are laying flat. However, that's it. Like we learned above, it's more elaborate. The second is to notify the business in the city to stop. So nestalko hatrisin, the shutters have to be removed hastes from displaying the wares, and vinena'alo achanois, you got to lock everything up, but it's not yet, even according to Rab Nosson. Avad not according to Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi. It's not yet Shabbos Kodesh. So therefore, Vadayin, Chamin, Menochem, L'gabei Kira, hot water can still be on the stove, Kedeiros, pots can still be put on the stove, you can still be Mavashil. But it's chischil et koyat kia shlishis. Now silek hamisalek. Whoever needs to remove the pots should remove the pots. Vehitmin hamatmin. Whoever has to insulate has to do it now, as we will learn later. We have the fourth Pedic Nach, the more details. There are two types of insulations. There's insulations that preserve the heat. There's insulations that adds to the heat. Chazal were goyzer that you can't even insulate prior to Shabbos in a material that adds to the heat. But to insulate in something that preserves the heat could be done, but when? Only before Shabbos. In other words, now is the time to do your last work, which was normally food related in the home, and v'hidlik hamadlik, and right afterwards, this takes a moment. To be toimen, You already had the blanket. You already had the material. You would take it off the stove. You would make the insulation in the bo'ofen hamutar, and you would light the candles. This is like Rab Nosson. And now Vishoya, there was still time like the rush. Lighting of the candles then didn't mean that you mamish took in Shabbos. With all of this, again, today the bottom line is that whoever lights the candles by default is being Mekabel Shabbos, but the Bnei Bayis don't have to be Mekabel Shabbos then, and many other pratim in Shulchan Aruch. Now, V'shoya, there's still enough time, a short amount of time. How much time? Again, you don't have a time, you don't have a clock, you don't have minutes. Kedei tziliyas da cotton, or kedei the time that it takes to glue a thin pita type of bread inside the walls of an oven, and it should become crusted. And right afterwards, v'toikeya umaria v'toikeya v'shoyv abraisa. It's not bubble, this is B'chal in Eretz Yisrael. And again, you had the final tarat. Again, not like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, thank you, that it was the fourth hadlakas anedus, it was the third, was both. Weiter in the Braise. Omar Rebbe Yoisi be Rebbe Chanina. Shomaiti she'im bol hadlik achar sheish tkiyas. That even after you blew the sixth sound, it's still a moment before Shabbos. Which you can still, if you didn't, you can still be madlik then. And now how do I know that? And again, this Braise noch emphasized in the beginning of the sounds. He's saying that not only in the beginning, at the end of the third sound, you still have another moment, a moment. His Rai is Gavaldik. Who made these sounds? Someone has to blow a Schaefer. Schaefer is Muktzah. So what do you think? The one who blew the Schaefer, he needed to blow even the last sound, Bisman, that he can still take it to where he needs to keep it for Shabbos. So they gave you that little window after the sixth, to move around muksa. You can't move muksa and bein hashmoshes. In other words, there's even a little bit of time after the sixth. Sharei, the Chazan HaKnesses here means the one who was given the responsibility to make these soundings. And a shofar is muksa. Where did they blow it? And they blew it from the high roof. Okay, so from the blowing it in someplace high until getting home, namtach epes, a minute. Depends where his home is. I'll tell you, the Gemara gives a better comeback. The Tana says, who says he took it anywhere? Could be it was blown in a location that after you blew it, there was a place there to put it away. So Amar Loy, no. If that's the case, like you said, Shlomo, where's his home? When every village, the Chazan HaKnesses who knew how to make these sounds loud, sometimes he lived 30 seconds away, sometimes he lived 3 minutes away. So when did they make, if you have to leave Zman for the Chazan HaKnesses to take, we're not even speaking about Hoitzah, there's an Eruv. But he has to take it home, and it's not going to be considered muksa. So nasata devarecha l'shiyurim. How far does the blower live from the location of the blowing? Everyone is different. The Ella, the fourth line from the bottom. No. Ella makim tzenua. There must have been a place. Yesh le'lechazan haknesses, which was biroish gagoy. Wherever the blowing was sounded, they made an outdoor box, rainproof, a safe. To put, it doesn't have to be rainproof. That is where he put the shofar. And if that's the case, then they did not need to give anything more than 5 seconds. That's right afterwards you can't light it. Lefi, now why do we have to say that? And what was his raya? Lefi she'ein metaltalin, because on Shabbos you cannot be metaltal a shofar. You cannot be metaltal trumpets. We're not learning now, but trumpets were needed to be blown on other occasions. Whatever instrument the instrument itself cannot be used on Shabbos. Ubemela, they become muksa. Hold on. Asks the Gemara, now who told you the shofar is muksa? I know that the shofar is primarily here to make sounds, and we may not be mashmiya koil midrabanan because you might fix the instrument on Shabbos. But you know what a shofar could be used for, guys? The difference between a shofar and a trumpet. The trumpet is a straight keli, and if I want to get water, scoop up water in a bottomless keli. You can't. But since the shofar is rounded, if someone needs a little bit of water, like a child, you can mamash put the water in the shofar and you can transport, and that is something you can do on Shabbos. So why is it muksa b'chlal? V'tanya, it says in a brayso shofar, yes, metaltel. It's only the chatzoitzrois are eino metaltelim. So the whole raya that Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Chanina was bringing doesn't make sense. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Yosef, no, like Hashem. The brayso that says a shofar could be transported on Shabbos, a shofar is not muksa. That's only if it's biyachid, if it belongs to a yachid, like we mentioned, because a yachid has the right, I have the right to use my shofar, even though it's primarily keli shemalachta le'isr, but it doesn't mean, right, we're going to have these sugyas soon. It doesn't necessarily mean it muksa. It has a secondary use. And I'm not allowed to use my shofar to bring water. because it's a curved keli. It's usable for that. But the raya that the Tana was bringing above is that these kelim, the shofars, belong to the tzibur. No one has the right to use a shofar that was designated to make the sound Shabbos kum tarayin. You can't use it for anything else other than that. That's takamuksa. Kan betzibur. We'll stop over here. God willing, a lot more to be continued.